Welcome back to the second part of our series, Exploring God's Character. The intent of this study is to separate from the deluge of man-made opinions and doctrines and focus purely on how God describes himself because he's the only one qualified to do so. Now, last time in part 1, we began looking at God as the healer and saw some powerful truths regarding the way that he describes himself in that regard. Today, we're continuing along this same topic because there's so much more to see about God's healing nature. Things that he's revealed to us himself because he wants us to know and receive all of what he has paid for us to have, including healing. So join me today as we continue exploring God's character in part 2 right now. Let's go. Welcome to Thriving Branch. I'm Jim. Today we are continuing with part 2 of our series exploring God's character. And when I've discussed healing previously, one question I usually get asked is, why is healing even that important? Why was it important that God describes himself as the healer? And why is it important that we understand and know him as our healer? And this objection, these questions, stem from the idea that healing is not really that essential. It's not essential for salvation and therefore is more of a dogma rather than a gospel doctrine. Now, as you might have already guessed, I don't agree with that sentiment. Because when your perspective of God is twisted, even just a little bit, it leads to suffering and pain and confusion. In short, twisted truths lead to torment. Twisted truths lead to torment. And as we think about it for a bit, the devil has been attacking the character of God ever since the very beginning. Back in the Garden of Eden, the first thing the serpent did was impugn the goodness of God to Eve, implying that God was withholding vital knowledge. And we certainly know where that twisted truth led. It led to expulsion from paradise. It led to suffering. It led to pain. And obviously, it led to confusion as well. Now, one application of this truth is that if the devil can somehow get us to doubt God's goodness, or even go as far as to get us to see him as the author or the source of our suffering, in other words, God is hurting us to teach us a lesson, or he's allowing us to suffer for some greater purpose. If we can believe that, if the devil can get us to think that way, then where can we turn to for help? There really is no other place. If you believe that God is the author of your suffering, if you believe that he is complicit in your pain, then obviously you won't be able to turn to him. You won't even want to turn to him for help. So you see, knowing the character of God, even as your healer, is absolutely essential, because without it, we're vulnerable. And the Bible is very clear that God is a good father, and as such, he gives us good gifts. And there are a lot of good gifts from our good Father. But how does God actually describe himself in this regard? We don't just want to go with man's opinions again. So let's look at how God describes himself. In Matthew chapter 7, verses 9 through 11, we can read the following. Matthew chapter 7, verses 9 through 11 says, "Or what man is there of you, whom if his son asks for bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him?" The picture being painted here is one of a father who cares for his children and gives them good things upon request. But again, if you've been duped into thinking that God isn't good or that he is the source of your pain, then you won't even bother asking. Why would you? So you see how damaging a lie this can be. It can cause us to cut ourselves off from the very source of our help, which is God himself. I lived this way personally for many years, believing that God was punishing me or hurting me on purpose to teach me a lesson. And so I know that there are many others out there as well, believing similar lies, similar falsehoods. But we can see here from this description that the Father, our Father in heaven, gives good things to them that ask him. Did you know that nowhere in Scripture is sickness ever defined as being a good thing? On the contrary, Jesus went around healing the sick, releasing the chains, lifting people out of their pit, breaking bondage. If sickness was meant as a tool of learning, as some people would believe today, then Jesus interrupted a lot of lessons. Jesus also told his disciples to heal the sick. Notice that he didn't say to them, "Go, and before you heal the sick, be sure that I'm not trying to teach them something first." No. Jesus said, "Go and heal the sick and proclaim the good news of the gospel." This should cause us to contemplate the compassion of Christ. Contemplate the compassion of Christ. You see, another common objection to healing today and God as the healer is that God only healed at that time in history to spread the gospel before the scriptures were written. However, much like other objections, that idea doesn't hold up to the way that God describes himself. In Matthew chapter 14, verse 14, we see a marvelous, eye-opening picture of Jesus. Matthew chapter 14, verse 14 shows us Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. I encourage you today to take some time and meditate, contemplate what this verse is telling you about Jesus. Not only did Jesus heal the sick, but he did so purely because of divine compassion. This wasn't cold logic or merely to spread religious ideas. Jesus cared for the people around him, and his care, his divine love and compassion moved him to action. This is Jesus on full display, apart from man's ideas, apart from human theology. Is this the Jesus that you've been taught? Is this the Jesus that you know personally? I encourage you today to drop the divisive dogmas of religion. Some Christians have a strange kind of relationship with suffering. They think suffering is good. They elevate suffering because they think it is increasing their holiness or giving them more favor with God. But I tell you, my friend, nothing could be further from the truth. Jesus is the one who heals. He doesn't make you sick. Jesus is the one who breaks chains. He doesn't put more chains on you. So drop the religion and start engaging in a real relationship with Jesus, as depicted in the scripture, the way that he describes himself. And I also encourage you to join me again for part 3 as we explore more characteristics of God. Until next time, be blessed.